Well, more office space is currently sitting empty in the United States than at any other point since economists began tracking it all the way back in 1979. And that is raising some alarm bells for the $20 trillion commercial real estate industry and the health of the country's economy in general. But as Kate Fisher found out, some businesses are coming up with creative solutions.
Perhaps the last thing you expect to see next to a plumbing firm in Northern Virginia, Indonesian Gates of Heaven. The building behind may look like the drab federal office it once was, but in fact it houses Bali and Springs, a spa and wellness club. Founder Stephanie Chon said the exterior was the hardest challenge when she decided to convert the former US Securities and Exchange Commission building.
I'm like looking at this terrible brick building, red bricks. I don't know if you noticed these terrible, ugly blue windows. That was one portion of the development that I was nervous about, and I didn't know how we would overcome. So the first thing that we erected when we came were those two gates to heaven. We didn't want people to walk in and feel as though they're in an office. That expansive, open air, just club is what we were looking for, bright lights. So another workaround with the ceiling heights was that we created this atrium, but also the skylight.
The transformation illustrates an out-of-the-box solution to the growing problem of empty offices. Office vacancies broke records in the fourth quarter of last year at 19.6%, according to Moody's Analytics.
Offices have experienced crises in the past, financial crisis, business crisis, geopolitical crisis. But now it's the crisis of the office itself, of the nature of work that is changing, of the meaning of location that is changing. And even things that people have to do together in person are not necessarily to be done in the type of offices and buildings where they have been done for the last 70 or 80 years.
Meaning that people can find new things to do in those buildings.
This is actually a perfect example of one of the, not challenges, but I guess a fun project that we had to hide. But this is actually a water main line, and he created two palm trees, and now people think it's part of the aesthetics, but we really were just trying to hide that ugly water main line.
And this is something this old federal building didn't have before, a roof deck complete with infinity pool, bringing a slice of the tropics to this retail park in urban Virginia. But transformations like this are unlikely to suit most redundant spaces, according to real estate experts.
I think out of all of these experiments, a few kind of standard operating procedures will emerge that might kind of scale a little bit. Probably less spas, again, more like housing or certain types of retail or logistics or even data centers. But overall, I don't see a single kind of silver bullet solution that is just going to come and replace all offices.
Bali and Springs has proved it can be possible and is looking to expand.
We do have a whole nother portion of the building, about 50,000 square feet on the other side. We're sitting on 11 acres. I'm thinking trails or bungalows, and definitely overnight accommodations. The goal is for this complex to be a one-stop shop for, again, anything wellness.
The future of the office may not be looking healthy, but finding creative ways to convert them could turn them into hot properties once again. Kate Fisher, CGTN, Alexandria, Virginia.
Okay, turn into hot properties. Wow, a lot to talk about. For more on office space and its future, we're joined by Ken Johnson. Ken is a real estate economist at Florida Atlantic University. Ken, thanks very much. I want to pick up on that last thing that we just heard, turning them into hot properties. I mean, that seems like a pretty big stretch considering what's playing out across the United States.
As one of the participants was mentioning, this is probably not going to be readily scalable. And it probably is not, because it's not that easy to convert office space into apartments. That's what most people have in mind.
Right.
But what we're going to see is a sharing and more along the lines of, wow, certain things are going to get more amenities. The space available per employee will start to grow, and there's probably going to be a sharing amongst future investors, current owners, and banks to make sure that everybody takes a little bit of a haircut and a little bit of an investment. And it doesn't look like this is going to be a crash like we saw in the financial crisis.
Well, that would certainly be good news to millions across the United States. Other than COVID, and I'm sure COVID is the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth reason we're in this place, what are some of the reasons that we're seeing office space empty, even as workers are being asked to come back into the office?
Well, those that are client-facing, they're still pretty robust settings. Those that are not client-facing and can be worked from home, you're starting to see those are the spaces that are going to become vacant the most or have the highest vacancy rates. Other issues that you're seeing is very much in the U.S. Much of our office space, commercial A office space, is located in the Northeast. But there seems to be a relocation out of the Northeast to the Sun Belt states. So that's going to be a chronic issue, but not a showstopper. But there are people leaving. There are offices and businesses relocating from New York, from Chicago, from Philadelphia to other parts of the country, mostly into the Southeast, the Sun Belt states.
Sure.
And that's going to lead to, again, less demand for office space in New York City, but a stronger demand for office space in Miami, Florida.
Let me counter that by one thing we ran into early on during COVID. We went to Cincinnati to do a story, and there was a big law firm that had 3 floors in a high-rise, realized that, you know what, we really only need 2. And so their lease was coming up, and they ditched one of these floors. So explain how these empty office places are creating doom loops in cities.
Well, that's very possible, where you see the tenants are leaving and they say, I don't need 3, I need 2. But today, just today, we saw China Merchants Bank acquire another 43,000 square feet in New York City. They're expanding their footprint. They got a 15-year lease at much more favorable terms. So there can be a doom loop, but the opposite of the doom loop is more space, better amenities, and perhaps we need that outside investor, which there's a lot of dry powder on the sidelines standing ready to come in and make purchases into these opportunities. So you're going to have the banks involved, the current owners involved, and probably third-party investors involved. And we're going to end up with a little bit better terms for the tenants, but a savable office market.
You know, you mentioned earlier it's going to be difficult to turn many of these into residential housing spaces. Why is that? And what about turning them into spaces for elderly living? Is that a possibility?
Well, just turning office into any sort of livable unit is very difficult. Electrical, plumbing, codes, etc. Not an easy thing to do. What will most likely happen, it will stay in some form of commercial use. And if not, if the delta is big enough, then you might see outside, for example, outside of the city of New York, you might see certain buildings razed or torn down and rebuilt and build new complexes, new living areas for seniors, affordable housing, et cetera.
Be easier to do that than just renovate. I get it now. You know, what about the local economy? Because here in D.C., the mayor has basically said, get these people back in these offices. It's killing our local economy. Just to explain some of the obvious reasons how the locals are really getting hammered by this.
Well, value of buildings come down, tax rolls go down. Of course, major cities and their mayors are going to be very, very concerned with that. But something strange is starting to go on, too. As we realize that some people can work from home and some people are more efficient working in the office, we're starting to see a shift in work from the office that could perhaps maybe not be handled by someone in the office, but could be handled by someone that's working from home. And the workloads are shifting ever more heavily onto those working from home. So the office space is being used for client interaction and much more the human interaction, and the folks at home are getting heavier and heavier workloads. So I don't think it will be much longer before we start seeing some people saying, I want to come back to the office.
I get it. You know, you talked about some of the unique challenges places like D.C. and the Northeast are facing, and a lot of people going to Sunbelt areas. But, you know, what this is playing out across the country. So they are feeling it in places such as Phoenix, and especially in the California area where a lot of people are just leaving that area. What ripple effect is this going to have long term?
So there is a concern that it could get into the regional banks and have an impact on the regional banks. That seems rather low. Chairman Powell seems pretty nonplussed by this and saying this could be an ongoing chronic issue. Careful to not use the word crisis. There's going to be some haircuts involved, but think of this as a balloon that's just, when pre-COVID, the balloon was just about full of air.
Yeah.
And all we're doing is letting a little air out of the balloon right now. We don't want it to deflate completely, but again, you're going to see less density in office spaces, more money, more amenities, a little bit lower rents. All in all, you're just resetting the barometer, if you will, for where and how and who's going to work in offices going forward.
There's going to be a new norm.
This will be a new norm. I don't think you're going to see a crash in commercial property going to zero or near zero. We're not going to have a foreclosure crisis, and we're not going to have a banking crisis out of this.
You know, Ken, I really appreciate your time and the flowery language. I really enjoyed it. We hope to chat with you more about this down the road. Thank you.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.